A few years ago, a strange study came out. Researchers found that the average person checks their phone hundreds of times a day. Not because they need to, not because something important happened, but because silence started to feel uncomfortable to the brain. Pause and really think about that. There was a time when people allowed themselves to be bored. They would sit with their thoughts, daydream, and let their minds wander naturally. Now, the moment quiet appears, most of us instinctively reach for stimulation before a single uninterrupted thought can fully develop. And that's where things become concerning. Most people assume this endless distraction is harmless, just normal behavior, a standard part of modern life. But in deep work, Cal Newport argues that this habit is slowly eroding the very skill that separates ordinary performers from truly exceptional ones. The ability to concentrate deeply, not for a few seconds, not while bouncing between tabs, not while checking notifications, answering messages, and listening to something in the background at the same time. Actual focus. The kind that transforms careers, develops valuable skills, produces meaningful work, and even changes how your mind feels on a daily basis. Because the reality is this: we live in a culture that celebrates being busy, but the real rewards go to people who can go deep, and most people never realize there's a difference. What's interesting is that busyness often feels like productivity. You respond to emails, check notifications, sit through meetings, consume endless information, switch from one task to another all day long. And by the end of the day, your mind feels completely drained. But if you pause and honestly ask yourself, what did I truly create today? Sometimes there's no clear answer. That's the trap. Modern life can create the illusion of productivity without producing meaningful results. And Cal Newport argues that this may be one of the most overlooked problems of our time. Because in a world where nearly everyone is distracted, the people who develop the ability to focus deeply gain a massive advantage. Not because they're more talented, not because they're luckier, because they can concentrate. And that changes everything. Carl Jung understood this nearly a century ago. While developing his influential psychological theories, Jung realized something essential. Deep thinking was almost impossible in the middle of constant noise, interruptions, and social demands. So he built a stone tower in Bollingen, far from distraction, where he could spend long periods alone, reading, writing, and thinking in complete silence. Not because he disliked people, but because meaningful thought requires uninterrupted space. And this pattern appears throughout history again and again. Nietzsche took long, solitary walks to think clearly. Writers retreated into cabins and quiet places. Scientists isolated themselves from distractions while working through difficult ideas. Even Bill Gates became known for his Think Weeks, where he stepped away from daily noise to read and reflect deeply. They all understood something many people overlook today. Your attention shapes the quality of your life. William James, often called the father of modern psychology, once said, "My experience is what I agree to attend to." In other words, whatever consistently holds your focus gradually becomes your reality. And in today's world, your attention is being pulled in every possible direction. The reality is, most people don't spend their days truly working anymore. They spend their days reacting. A notification appears, they react. An email arrives, they react. A recommended video shows up, they react again. Over time, the brain becomes conditioned to seek constant novelty instead of sustained depth. And neuroscience supports this idea. Psychologists use the term attention residue to describe what happens after interruptions. Part of your mind remains attached to the previous task while you try to move on to the next one. So even when you finally sit down to focus, your attention never fully settles. That's why so many people struggle now with things that once felt easier. Reading books feels harder. Studying feels harder. Sitting quietly feels harder. Thinking clearly feels harder. Because concentration has been broken into fragments. Picture two different people. The first spends an entire day constantly jumping between tasks, checking messages, switching between work and social media, watching short videos during every break, multitasking from morning to evening. The second person works with complete concentration for only a few uninterrupted hours. No notifications, no distractions, no constant switching. Who creates better work? The answer is pretty clear, but here's what makes it interesting. The first person feels more busy. The second person achieves more meaningful results. That's also why deep work can feel uncomfortable in the beginning. The brain becomes conditioned to constant stimulation. So when silence appears, it starts feeling unfamiliar. Even spending 10 quiet minutes alone with your own thoughts can feel challenging. And in many ways, that reveals something important about the kind of world we live in today. Psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi described this intense state of concentration as flow. It's the experience of becoming so absorbed in what you're doing that everything else fades into the background. Time seems to disappear. Self-awareness quiets down. Your mind becomes completely engaged in the present moment. And research over several decades has shown something fascinating. People consistently report feeling more fulfilled and genuinely happier during these deep states of focus than during passive forms of relaxation. Think about that for a moment. The times when people feel most alive are often the moments when they are fully immersed in something meaningful. Not while endlessly scrolling, not while refreshing apps out of habit, not while splitting attention between multiple things at once. Human beings naturally feel better when they experience depth. And that may be one of the biggest things modern distraction has taken away. Not just productivity, but meaning itself. The truth is, many people feel mentally drained today, not because they're overwhelmed with meaningful work, but because their attention is constantly pulled in different directions and never settles long enough to feel centered. Everything feels divided. Conversations become fragmented. Attention becomes fragmented. Goals become fragmented. Even entertainment has been reduced to endless short clips, competing for a few seconds of focus. And after a while, something subtle starts happening. You begin to feel disconnected from your own life. Because depth is where emotions are truly felt. Depth is where clarity comes from. Depth is where confidence is built. Shallow attention leads to shallow experiences, and you can see it everywhere. People attend concerts, but experience them mostly through a phone screen. They visit beautiful places and immediately think about posting the moment online. They spend time with friends while checking notifications every few minutes. Imagine standing in front of a breathtaking sunset while worrying more about capturing it than actually living it. That's the reality of modern life for many people today. Physically present, but mentally somewhere else. So how do you actually take back your focus? Cal Newport explains that deep work almost never happens randomly. You have to create conditions that protect it on purpose. That means eliminating distractions, setting aside uninterrupted time, training your ability to concentrate like you would train a muscle. One of the most powerful ideas from the book is surprisingly simple. Don't schedule breaks from distraction. Schedule breaks from focus. Most people spend the majority of their day distracted, then occasionally attempt to concentrate. People who practice deep work reverse that pattern. They spend long periods fully focused. If your attention is constantly consumed by noise, comparison, outrage, endless stimulation, and distraction, your inner world slowly begins to mirror that confusion. But when your attention is directed toward meaningful work, learning, reflection, creativity, and presence, your mind begins changing too. You become calmer, more focused, more fulfilled. Here's the reality. Deep work isn't just about accomplishing more tasks. It's about becoming fully engaged in whatever you're doing. Because when the mind is constantly distracted, it slowly loses the ability to experience depth at all. In your work, in your relationships, in conversations, even in the way you experience life. And maybe that explains why so many people feel emotionally drained, despite being endlessly entertained. They consume content all day long, yet rarely form a deep connection with anything. Not with their work, not with themselves, not with the present moment they're living through. So perhaps the real goal isn't simply becoming more productive. Maybe it's taking back control of your attention before the world starts controlling it for you. So the next time you catch yourself reaching for your phone without any real reason, stop for a moment. Let the silence exist. Because beyond all the distractions, is something that's becoming rare for most people today. If this video gave you a moment to slow down and think differently, subscribe. Because here, we're not addicted to noise. We're learning how to think past it.